right, welcome back for the new champion crown.
The new champion crown. And if you ever wanted to, as a Tennessee fan, it's never really fun to see Florida win, but I couldn't help but picture that, like, Todd Golden, to me, like, watching him coach a basketball game is how I feel like most triathletes look during their taper. Just like tantrum after tantrum after tantrum. But no, it was a great game to watch. But yeah, basketball season's over, which is disappointing, which means we can turn our focus towards triathlon season. It's April 8th. The year is 2025. Welcome aboard, everybody. You listen to the Crushing Iron podcast. This is episode 844.
Yeah, and if I can find my password, YouTube TV will be ended today.
You think they ever go in and just, like, you know, with all these like passwords and stuff? I mean, it's funny you say that, because I went into like my subscription apps this weekend in my phone. I was trying to like delete and clear some things out, and I was like, I don't even remember subscribing to this app. Like, maybe they got me on like the 7-day free trial. They make you put in your information, and then like 7 days later, you're like, yeah, I kind of like it right now. Maybe I'll keep using it. And I looked at least 85% of them, and I was like, delete, unsubscribe. What was I thinking when I subscribed to this? But on the password front, like, I'm pretty sure that they like change it on you and then want you to reset it. And you're like, yeah, maybe once I reset it, I kind of like it now. I've gone through this like whole ordeal to just reset the password. Maybe I'll just keep it for a little bit. I definitely think it's like a sales tactic.
Oh, the psychology of all this stuff is fascinating.
It really is, right?
Yeah, I got an email on an account I rarely use. It said one of my Vimeo subscriptions was going to renew, and if I didn't cancel by April 8th, it would just renew. And that's today. It was like this morning. And it was on, I just happened to look at it, and I'll probably keep it, but boy, there are...
Right, because you're like, the stress of having to cancel it in time, it just like disrupts your whole day.
Yeah, but you know, I kind of need it for some things, but yeah, there's a lot of that out there, man. And then you have now these apps that find apps that you don't use, and you know, and I had one of those. I think like Rocket Money was one, and so I'm subscribed to that. I have no idea how to cancel that, because I think I delete. You know, I got to probably reload the app, and then there was another one that I know I have somewhere that found all these apps I wasn't using, or shit that I was subscribed to, and I have no idea what that one even was. So I'm looking through bank statements going, what the hell? And, you know, sometimes it doesn't really tell you what it is.
Exactly. It's like some random thing from a random place.
That's why, I forgot what show that was, but I think it was Friends. They just canceled all their bank accounts and credit cards and then started new ones.
Oh my gosh, yeah, but and that's the triathlon related content that everybody needs. And now hopefully you're picking up your phone, checking out your subscriptions. We're just over here trying to help you balance your checkbook and stay on budget. Okay, that's what we're here for. Not just for triathlon training advice and life advice, but we're also here to encourage you to scroll through your subscriptions in your iPhone and just make sure you're on the tip top, right? Because all those extra funds, they've been going towards races. And we had a lot of races this last weekend. You had Oceanside, which was televised on Outside TV and YouTube. You had a couple of T100 races in Singapore, which look like death marches. I'm not sure why they even have those races there, but it was a lot of race watching. Then you had Texas 70.3, which apparently was just a tad bit windy, canceled the swim, and a lot of people bailed on the race in total. And there was a lot of do not starts. And then actually from one of our athletes that we had racing, like they said, once you got off the bike, although it felt like a strength training with your arms, that the run weather was like really, really, really ideal. So yeah, I mean, it's always interesting, like when you hear athletes talk about experiences like that, and so from an athlete standpoint, a lot of people say, because this athlete say, I felt really great on the bike, I felt like really great on the run, but the weather was great. But then again, I didn't swim. And while you didn't swim, I think it would be like a really cool exercise. I mean, I don't know if you can figure this out, but like, people that might poo-poo the fact that you didn't have to swim, so I'm not doing the 70.3. But when it comes from like an energy cost, like it's always windy at Tech 7.3. You've been down there when I was racing. I've been on there twice. It's always windy. It's either when are you going to get the wind, tailwind, headwind, and what direction, and sometimes a crosswind. So there's going to be wind. It's like signing up for Ironman Texas and expecting it to be cold and no wind, and it's like signing up for Wisconsin and expecting them to have like plowed through the roads and it just be like perfect pavement and like flat roads. You know what you're going to get. So you know what you're going to get when you sign up, and you know what you're going to get when you go down there. But having said that, like even if the winds are slightly, let's say the water, was, flat and you got a wetsuit swim and you're an athlete that might be like a 30, 32-minute swimmer. Well, and then you hop on the bike. Let's say the winds are just mild that day. They're at like, 8 to 10 miles an hour, headwind, tailwind, again, or even if it's 20, right? And the year that you came down there with me, I think we had like 20-mile-an-hour headwinds on the way out. So you're conserving a shit ton of energy. And then on the way back, you're having to you're having to use a lot more to fight against the wind. So it's even that way. Now, crosswinds are a different story because you don't really gain anything having to deal with it. It just takes an enormous amount of energy and strength from your upper body to make sure you're not doing it. Plus, a lot of people, depending on what like kind of the wheel they had in the front, they might not be fueling as much either because you're afraid of just flat out getting blown off your bike. And a lot of people that year that you did Wisconsin, that it was so like the rain and the weather was so windy and crap. A lot of people were so underfueled because they were afraid to like take just one hand off their handlebars.
Yeah, well, I couldn't even get anything out. I had such big gloves on, and I couldn't even get anything out of my kit. So I mean, I basically did an Ironman without any fuel.
All right, and so then you go and you do a race like with your, you do this crosswind with no swim, but you're out there probably 20, 25, 30 minutes longer than you normally would. I mean, you're putting out more energy per body. I think, does it even out perfectly? No, but I think it probably comes close to evening out in terms of not having done something. You look at the stress and, well, yeah, you can't, if you're one of those people who's like, oh, you can't count that. So you count yourself as a 70.3er because you didn't swim, which I'm sure is why a lot of people bailed on it. But from an energy cost and the amount of effort it took to battle the crosswinds, like you're probably burning that same amount of energy on the bike. And then the use of your upper body, just having to stay upright and then being underfueled. So it's race season. There's always going to be something. There's going to be canceled swims. There's going to be shortened bikes. There's going to be shortened swims. There's going to be hot races, going to be windy races, there's going to be perfect condition races, and that's the nature of the beast. And I think we've just flat out forget as we we come up on Oceanside, that weather looked pretty much ideal. It was perfect run weather. Yes, the water was cold, but it looked like absolutely perfect, like traditional SoCal weather. We can talk about that race later. And then you got, Ironman Texas coming up in 2 weeks. And that's always a rough race. Like there's always high wind. There's always like sneaky heat. It's kind of like, in Texas, it gets hotter earlier, but for us, it's kind of like Chattanooga 70.3. It's like the first hot weekend of the season when you haven't had any time to acclimate to it. And it just so happens, like, oh, hey, third week of May, we're just going to crank the temperature up. You just never know what you're going to get. And I think, when we spend, depending on when you started your quote unquote off season, you go from November, December to January, February, March, you're 5 months removed from having to deal with the challenges that come at you. It's kind of a bitch slap in the face. You're like, wait a minute, like I've been in my basement with my special Wahoo fan and my bike that moves up and down for me, and my machinery, and my trainer gets to pick what watts I'm using. I just have to sit there and pedal and watch 17 episodes of Suits, and I'm in pretty solid shape. And then you come out and you walk into transition and morning of the race, and you see white caps and you see, bikes blowing around everywhere and flags blowing. You're like, maybe I don't want to do this. And it's not because you don't want to, it's because you're so like, I think it's just so disorienting and so intimidating because we put ourselves in this like tiny, tiny, tiny bubble of, comfort that the slightest bit of like being uncomfortable, we're like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. And I'll go right back to like being comfortable. It's a hard transition time of year. It gets warm. You got, it's a little bit windier a lot this time of year too for people. So it's just, I think it's a rough patch, but it's not a rough patch. It doesn't have to be. You just have to be able to, you have to be willing to just go with the flow of things, do your best. And again, control the effort and the execution of the day. Because I guarantee you, there was a lot of people out there. You weren't going on Texas 7.3 specifically. You weren't going by miles per hour. You were just going by, is my bike upright? Check. Am I pedaling forward? Check. Have I drank in the last 30 minutes? Check. But probably wasn't a lot but worried about power or, again, miles per hour or making their, their best bike split, metrics. It was just get it done. And then they got it done and they were actually rewarded with like really great run with us. So it's just, it's that time of year. And I think, again, we say it's every single year this time of year, we just get so trapped into like the comfortability of like training in our basement or the cool, perfect weather that these early season races, like you just, you don't know what you're going to get. And that's every race though. So I think it's time for us to kind of get mentally checked in and locked in and get prepared for it.
Yeah. I remember that first time you went down to Texas and you were racing and I was just kind of hanging out, shooting video and everything. That like the registration day, I think it was in this big white tent thing. And that thing was just like blowing. I mean, the wind was unbelievable down there. And I think it always is, right? I mean, but you make a really good point. I think that early season like that, I've always been kind of afraid. The one time I actually did a super early one was the New Orleans one. And that thing bit me hard, because even living in Nashville, I just wasn't prepared for that heat. And I mean, it's windy. That course used to be super windy too, if I remember right. And it was just a grinder. And I hit that run and I just couldn't even. But I think a lot of that's because I wasn't really outside enough. And there's something for me about just getting outside and all that fresh air and being used to that. I would imagine like if you raced something like Texas or 70.3 Texas or one or the other and you hadn't been outside at all, that had to be not only the wind and the, it's like every time I get out my bike, the first time is kind of tougher because just, even a little wind makes a huge difference.
Oh, dude, your core is like your core and your lower back are like the most sore that they've been all year just because you're having to like hold on to the bike and you're actually having to steer. I mean,
right.
It's like, and I just think it's, when we talk so much about stress is stress and like everything that we're doing in life adds stress and mental fatigue and, mental stress, emotional stress, it all impacts your ability to perform, right? It always does. It raises your RPE and lowers your output. That's fact. Okay. But so you go from like this perfect training environment all year round. And again, it doesn't matter what training environment you have. The first race of the year, I think it's always tough from that standpoint. Like we can, because we still like to control our settings. 95% of the time we don't wake up. We're like, you know what, today I think I'm really going to get out of my comfort zone. I think I'm going to bike that route that I'm always afraid to bike. Or actually, I think I'm going to go up the trainer today. I'm actually going to go bike outside, even though I really don't want to. I'm going to go, no, because stress is so high in your normal life. You're like, why would I add additional stress in doing something that I don't want to do? It's just going to create more stress and I'm going to be worse off. And so you take the added stress, right, which I think a lot of people have, right? I mean, I talked a lot about mine, early last year, is like you go to these races where you're removing life stress, like, you don't have your spouse or you don't have your kids around, but you're still traveling. Or if you do have them, you got the additional, added stress of travel. You've got the added stress of like, you're not sleeping in your own bed. You're having to go out to eat. I think we just don't really fully grasp and appreciate the comfort that we have in our day-to-day training. You wake up in the same bed that you're very comfortable in, right? You probably went to bed at a decent hour because you're not thinking about a race. You wake up, you know where everything is, you know what food to make, what settles well. You do your routine, you go down to your basement, you up in your training room, whatever it is, you go for a run in your same route. There is no outside stress. Outside the normal stress that you usually have. It's all repetitive. And then you go through like the additional added stress of like race week. Like, so you gotta, Now I got to pack. I mean, most people's stress starts like on the Monday before a Sunday race. All right, I got to pack my bags. I got to make sure I got everything. I got to go to the store. I got to go to the bike shop, but I don't have this. I got to order that. And now I'm out of that. Now I got to see if I can get it drop shipped to my hotel. And like now I'm checking my hotel, make sure I still have a room. They didn't overbook. All right, now I'm going to travel. Is there traffic? How long is it going to take me? Is my flight going to be on time? Am I going to miss my flight? And my bike bag is packed. Is it packed correctly? Is my bike even going to get there? And then you arrive. And if you traveled, you're like, please, dear God, my bike came. And if it did come, I really hope it's not like, dinged up or something's not broken, which half the time it is. You're traveling there or traveling in a car or a plane is all stress. It's all stress on your body, and you're just sitting there. So you're not as mobile, you're not as flexible. And then you arrive to a brand new city. You got to go to the check-in, whether you're alone or with your kids or with your family. It's still added stress. And then I got to go to a room. Hopefully the bed's comfortable. Maybe the room's too hot. Maybe the room's too cold. Where are we going to eat? It's just, I could go on. It is like one mountain of added stress, added thinking. It's super stressful. That's why you and I both, like when we start working with athletes and they're doing like maybe they're one of their first races, we're like, pick the closest one to home. The one you can drive to, the one you're the most familiar with. And the year after that, like it's a lot easier just to do like a repeat race. Like, like doing Wisconsin, like you do over and over again, the same way I did Gulf Coast 6 years in a row. The first year or two, stressful. It's all new. And then you're driving a third, you're like, hey, when did they put that there? That's new. It's like you're super comfortable. You don't even have to think, right? It's like rolling up to run camp. Like you feel like you're at home because you've been there so much. You're only there 4 or 5 days out of the year, but everything seems less stressful because it's super familiar. And then you've got the added, now I go to a race briefing. Now I got to go to my bike check-in. Now I got to go to the expo. Now I got to get my race bib. Now I got to talk to people I don't want to talk to. Now I got to go back to my room. And where am I going to eat? This is not what I usually want to eat. I got to scroll through the menu. And all that's going on while you're trying to relax your body and recover. And then you've got to get ready for a race where you have no idea. So all you're doing is checking the weather. And then you're like, oh, now I got to change things up. Now what's going to happen? And you're really just adding stress. One of two ways you're adding stress. Man, the weather looks hard. It's going to really be a tough day. Or the weather looks perfect. And you're like, oh, I might just smash this. And then so now your expectations are too high. And that's all before we've even gotten to race morning. Right? Regardless of the lead up, right? And that's not to mention 95% of people who are like hopping in these Facebook groups and are like, hey coach, this guy did like a 100-mile bike and 20-mile run twice the week out. Have I done enough? Am I ready? And you got all that added stuff and all that added stress. Hey, I heard they closed down road, 4579 on Highway 30, and there's like 2 pounds of gravel in the middle of the race. What kind of tires are you using? Are you gonna be able to stay upright? Constant stress. Constant added stress. And then you're probably not recovered as much. It's probably impacting your ability to perform. And then you got the race, right? Where these conditions are going to be what they're going to be. And so when you look at like how people are going to perform and you're trying to like measure and, predict what you're capable of performing, like it's in my opinion, like instead of worrying so much about the, your swim time and your power output and your pace on the run and all these things, like I would put every bit of my extra preparation time, especially during like that taper period, into what can I do daily to minimize stress. If I'm sitting in my Normatec boots, maybe I can look ahead and book out a few restaurants that I know I like. I got something on the menu that I know that's going to agree with me, or it's the same restaurant I went to last year. Or maybe I know I'm going to a hotel where I can make my own food. Check. Right, there's one thing off my list. I know I've stayed in this hotel before, and the beds are great. I sleep well. Check. Right, I go to this one hotel and I know that the rooms are always super cold and I always sleep better. Check. All these things we can do to eliminate the stress before we even get to race day, where there's going to be added stress. 3,000 people who probably haven't ridden outside worth shit for the last 6 months. They're going to be just as squiggly as you are trying to hold their line. Right. And then they're going to be just as panicky when they get in the open water swim. And you got colder swims like Oceanside, which are cold. So you got St. George coming up, at the early May, and that's always cold. Like things that are going to shock your body. The whole thing's a shock to your body. When we've been we haven't been hibernating, so we've been training, but in terms of sheltering ourselves from the harshness of what racing is and performing your best, most people just completely shelter yourself from it. Or you've tried too hard to not shelter yourself from it, and you've gone and run out in like the negative 20-degree wind chill, and you've been fighting winds, every single ride you go on there. By the time you get to race day, you're like, I don't know that I want to do this again. I've touched the hot stove just a few too many times. This probably hasn't helped anybody. this probably has just stressed out more and more people that are going to race. But I think, and I talk to athletes about this all the time. Like, I just don't think you fully understand, like, all these little things, how they add up to, added stress and impacting your race from a mental, emotional, and physical standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, this sort of hits on what I've been going through lately. I'll get up and go out on the balcony in the morning, and it's been really chilly again. But it's super windy up here at this time of year too. And I keep looking out the lake thinking, I feel like a little kid. And I told my athletes this, I was like, I feel like a kid waiting for the playground to open. It's sort of like it's sitting there, but that lake is just a little too cold yet. And the wind kind of, doesn't let me get on my sup board because I can hardly move it. All these things. And yesterday was a perfect example of that because it was free. It was like 13-degree feel like in the morning and windy, like just super windy. So yeah, as my day went on, I thought, well, I'll get on that treadmill. And then I said, you know what? I'm not going to do that. I had to consciously flip my switch and just go out in the elements and run. It was so cold and windy, but I just put the hoodie on and like you were saying, I didn't, pay attention to pace. I wasn't really dialed into any of that. I was just trying to get in that moment of what I was doing and just one step after the other and just kind of because I think that's a skill too, I mean, not only in elements, but just normally, just the idea of sort of realizing that, if you're doing a 70.3 or a full, you've got a long way to go. And it's almost like building up that, repetition of just being where you're at and understanding like that. It's sort of like, meditation in motion is the way I think of it. And because it's like if you try to be done before you start, then that's only stress. That's more stress. And that's why I always tell people in the swim is like, you can't finish the race in the swim. So just you got to find a good groove and think of it as almost a warm up, based on the rest of the race. And I think if you get in the water and and you're going too hard out of the gate and you're already there's already finish line designs in your mind and all that kind of shit. You just really got to let go of that and just sort of be where you're at and take your time and let it go. And I think that, running like I did yesterday outside, those are all, I just look at all that stuff as prep, as just sort of like being able to do it. Can you get into those conditions at Texas on that bike and not be concerned about watts and just kind of just be focused in that stuff and just kind of grind through it. It's just, I always praise my athletes when they say, yeah, it was raining and I didn't want to go outside, but I did it. Just little things like that, I mean, you don't have to always do that, but Amelia Boone, I'll go back to her. She's like, her training for those Spartan races or whatever the hell she does is always, she just purposely picks the toughest time of the day to train in. And I'm not saying we got to do that, but we definitely have to kind of be able to flip a switch and get into it, when we don't want to on occasion.
No, I mean, it's, as you were talking, I was thinking about the reason that, whenever I'll schedule an athlete for some kind of a test, like a swim test, a bike test, a run test, just try to check a little bit of progress, you have to toe this line between, how fresh do you really want them? Mm-hmm. Because they're never going to train fresh. So and a lot of people do this. They're so caught up in wanting to nail, the test, quote unquote, because they want to see improvement or they want to tell their friends, hey, I went up 25, 30 watts on my bike, and I'm like, dude, I see this every week when someone takes a week off, they have their best run ever because they're totally fresh. They're not fit. They I think a comments come on. I was like, hey, came back from vacation, haven't swum in a week. Today I felt awesome, but not surprising because I haven't done shit in a week. So so is that really indicative? You just did nothing for a week, but now you feel fitter. Is that what happens? No, it's not. You're just fit, right? We talk about fatigue, mass fitness all the time. So so a lot of people they'll over rest for a test, kill it, and then they go back and they reload a ton of training. And then they wonder why, like, they can't hit numbers in training because you did it fresh and you never trained fresh. And so that's why it's always important, I think, to leave like a little bit of fatigue in the legs, because in the arms when you swim, because that's more realistic to how you're going to train. Same thing with like the added stress you have during race week. Like, the body just has to be able to withstand stress to perform well. And I think that's how you get the best kind of markers for performance and predicting, like, hey, how long are they be on course? You know, what do they need to be able to do? How much energy are they going to expend? You know, like all these things. Because when they're in normal day-to-day life and you're adding stress, listen, all racing is stress management and energy expenditure. That's it. And so the more you can, you know, the more efficient the athlete becomes at managing their stress and still being able to perform. And then what you're doing is you're lowering the energy cost to perform at the same level while still, you know, taking on a certain amount of stress. Like that's the key. And we just get, I think, so over, you know, we want to rest so much. Like a newer athlete, this is our first race together. It's like, hey, you know, how long are we going to, you know, taper? Like 3 weeks? And I'm like, no, like maybe 4 or 5 days, maybe. When you're super consistent week in and week out, like you just don't, your body's used to it. And then so when you stop training way too early, your body goes into like shutdown mode. So you can't, for a lot of people, you just can't taper that long. And so like going into these races, like I just think it's important to keep so much of your daily routine as normalized as you can, even though there's going to be a lot of periods where you can't, because there's travel, right? There's new places and there's check-in, and there's the overwhelming, you know, stress for people where, you know, you're going to be, you know, doing more and around more people, and that might not be your thing. And so it's a lot to manage, you know, I think. And so, you know, when you go into your training, it's again, like, you know, like the Amelia Boone thing, like, should you do that thing every single day? No, because I think you're just getting burnt out of like having to continuously go for it. But occasionally that's something that you should try to do. You know, I mean, yeah, sometimes people are like, hey, I didn't, you know, my pool was closed today and I just hate going to the other one because I don't know the people there. I'm like, listen, you're not going to know 2,948 people at your next race. You better get used to it. You know, or the people that hate circle swimming and don't want to swim. Like, you know, you're going to hop into like a lake or an ocean or river, and you're going to be completely, it's going to be like LA rush hour traffic. You might as well just get used to it. I mean, might as well. You know, the aqua ladies are in there, you know, causing white caps. You got the, you know, the aqua aerobics mafia in there giving you the side eye, and you're like, yeah, but the water was super warm. I didn't want to do this. And you're like, you better just do it. You know, take a ride outside. It doesn't have to be pretty. And I think that's why, you know, you have to, when you're doing like the spirit of the workouts, you're heading outside for these rides and runs, and sometimes like not ideal conditions, you know, it's just to get your mind right that the work, like the work has to be done. It doesn't have to be pretty, you know, and then you just have to remember, like, that's like yesterday morning, like, it's just Hayden and I here until Thursday or Friday, and so I haven't been able to do my early morning workout. So he left for school yesterday. He left. I was like, man, it is gorgeous. Not a cloud in the sky. I didn't feel any wind. It was like high 30s, low 40s. I'm like, I better go out and run, because if I don't, I'm probably not going to do it as the day gets on. And this is probably one of the last, like, you know, perfect temp days to run. So I hop out. I'm cruising. I'm like, dude, I feel amazing. And I'm going through my head, I'm like, maybe I can qualify for Boston in like 2 weeks. Like, I am on fire right now. This feels incredible. My legs feel great. I'm just cruising, and then I hit to like the greenway by the house. I mean, we're talking like 0.6 miles. So like I'm feeling myself after 0.6, which we already knew was a mistake. And then I was like, all right, I can go right, I can go left. I was like, let me just take the left. I'll do loop around, take a left. At least 25 mile an hour headwind. And I had a tailwind the whole first like 0.6. And it's like downhill, and I was just like totally feeling myself. And I hit the wind. I was like, oh, this is going to just suck royally. And I was feeling so good. You know what I did? I picked the hilly route. I was like, man, I'm feeling great today. I'm going to take on the hilliest route by my house. So I take a left into the headwind, into the hills. And my pace went from 820s to like 940s in like 20 seconds. Yeah. And so I had to immensely immediately make that shift between like, all right, I'm just going to freaking nail this run. I'm going to feel good. It's a Monday. What better we start the week? The sun is shining. Life is great. Couldn't be better. Triathlon is life. And then I took a turn. I was like, this is going to be the worst one ever. And then it's not going to be the worst one ever. It's just not going to be nearly as awesome as you thought it was going to be. You're on the hills, and you know what? There's power in the hills, and you're then I went through like the triage of like how to rally yourself from like feeling yourself too early. And I was like, yeah, but now you're not going to be as sore the next day because you're not going to run as hard. Your cadence is going to be slow. You're taking your hills. It's all strength work. Keep it aerobic and just get it done. And sometimes, and honestly, like, I know it's not how we like to think about races or even like training days, because we always look for some kind of added, metric or medal or kudos or whatever it is to make ourselves feel like it was good enough. But I mean, a lot of times good enough is good enough. And good enough means starting it and finishing it. And it doesn't even mean making it perfect. It just means getting it done and choosing to do it and making the time to do it. And a lot of times, like, that's what some of these races come down to, and you just got to get started to feel it out. I think a lot of people's races are determined the night before and the morning of. I think very few are decided during, because it's the mindset that you choose to have going into the race that sets you up for success or not as much success during the race, depending on what kind of, attitude or what measure of success you have going into it. You hop out of the gate and you're like, God, your legs aren't there yet. You're not seeing the watts, and you're immediately disappointed. Instead of like, you know what? Instead of being immediately disappointed, you don't go back and you're like, man, like, you know what? I remember at least 5, 6, 7 workouts this year where my first 20 minutes felt like trash. And then my legs came around and I felt awesome. And that's probably what's going to happen today. And you don't even know what's going to happen, right? It just, you could just be talking positive, but now you've at least set yourself up to be in a more positive space to execute, right? And so I do. I just think how we go into these races mentally and emotionally really determines, like, to a much higher degree, our preparation and our ability to execute and perform on race day, a lot more so than what we physically are capable or believe we are prepared to do.
Yeah. Yeah. But like when you said that about going down in 0.6 and then turning into a headwind, what I always like to think about is like, yeah, you did that. And then, so say it's a 20-mile-an-hour headwind. How do you get that to be mentally 10% in your mind by the end of that run or something? It's sort of like jumping in the water and it feels cold race morning. And if you continually keep that feeling or mindset that it is cold, it's going to be a tougher swim. So you just sort of have to work your way through it and kind of lower the intensity mentally. Same with like it's running out in the wind or riding out in the wind. I think once you get into it, like if you're mentally psyched out by it, like immediately and it sticks with you, I think that's a issue. It's sort of like yesterday when, I'm out running in the wind and the cold, and by the end I was like, this is not that bad. Even though it was the same weather as when I started, you know what I mean? So I think that's another thing too, that we can, it's almost like letting go and just being there or whatever, because it's so easy to sort of, like you're saying, the night before. It was interesting to think about the night before the race versus race morning. The night before the race, I'm usually just like anxious as shit. And then I wake up and I get down there. When I'm there, if people aren't rushing me all over the place to, go do shit, I feel pretty relaxed. It's sort of like, I've always called it walking the plank. It's like, you're here, you got to go in. There's nothing you can do. And it really hits, it solidifies in the morning. But the night before, I'm always just like mentally going through the race. I'm not trying to do this on purpose, but I find myself just going, okay, what am I going to do at this hill or that turn, or when am I going to do it's just like stupid shit that runs through my head all the time. But that race morning vibe, it's really interesting, man. I've watched enough races where, and I think we've talked about this, but I'll just kind of walk around and look at people the morning of the race, and I can tell people who are just completely messed up in their head versus the calm ones. It's just like it's such an art, I think, or, to be able to calm down with all that, you got Mike Riley screaming and the music cranking and stuff like that. And the people are, we're where's my bag? Give me that. I need like the whole panic situation. It's almost like you really
like going to Costco, man.
Yeah, it's a little bit stimulating, and how do you kind of just de-stimulate in that moment? Because if you're going to go in there just too hyped, it's really kind of, it's almost like you're talking about, coming off a complete rest week or something and being fresh. It's one thing to be fresh, but it's another thing to be able to understand how to control that for the long day. That's if you jump in that water and you're too hyped, jacked up, if you can't sort of manage that energy in your body and your mind, it can get you out of whack. So it's sort of like energy and enthusiasm. It's like, last night you watched that national championship basketball game. Those guys came out hyped, and every three was just a brick off the backboard. It's like
airball, brick.
Yeah,
it was horrific to watch.
That's interesting, man. And I think that those coaches a lot of times say, hey, just focus on defense or whatever, stuff that you can control rather than, trying to be, it's almost like,
make every shot.
Yeah. I mean, cause that can start getting in your head too, right? Or like if you're in the water, just like, that's what a defensive analogy might be, just get comfortable and feel good in that water and just kind of start really kind of taking your time and find a good catch and just find a good rhythm versus trying to be super fast right out of the gate, I think Samson actually said that. He's like, I think everybody's just too hyped right now. They're just shooting bricks,
first
man.
interview, right?
Yeah. He goes, it's just the nerves of the day. So, I mean, those guys, these like 18, 19, 20-year-old kids in front, like, I just can't even imagine. Like, talk about an Ironman morning, you talk about, how about, national championship night in a dome in front of 30 million people on TV. Just like they have to be different mentality. I don't understand how they do it, to be honest.
I mean, half of them look 37.
I know. Well, that's why, because the stress.
I mean, I think I was watching. I was like, how in the world are you in college still? It's like, but yeah, you never know. But it's
too fast.
Yeah, I mean, but I also think there's, and I had quite a few athletes like this last weekend just have in their mind total busts on training. Like they had a game plan, and they had, again, like we do this even in training. Like I've got a plan for tomorrow, and I got this, and I'm going to do this, and it's set up perfectly, and my bottles are made, and you wake up and you're like, and maybe you got kids, you're like, and I got 2 kids that are sick, I got no sleep. Now what do I do? You adapt. You be flexible. I drove out to my favorite spot to do my ride, and I forgot my nutrition. What do I do? You go back home, you get your nutrition, you go back and you do it. Or you hop on your trainer and you make the best of it. Or you move the session to the next day. And so I think we oftentimes try to find way too much failure in what was already, because again, as humans, we think we're always in control all the time. My plan is my plan, and it's going to happen. Right. And then when something deviates from it, that's just something I continuously, I think most parents like this with their kids. It's like with Hayden, he's like, well, you said, I'm like, dude, I know I said, but things change, and that's okay. And in things, you have to be adaptable, and you have to be flexible, and you have to be able to, to go with the flow sometimes, because you can want something to happen all you can, but if it doesn't mean, I'm not living up to my, word, or you're not living up to yours. It's like things just change. But I think we get so caught up because we can control so many things now, right? With technology and our schedule and the ease of training, at home, that any kind of slight deviation feels really, really stressful. But it doesn't have to be. And even if you had a really bad weekend and you didn't get your long ride and you didn't, and then, instead of just going back home and be like, oh, I'm just going to work out twice as hard this week, or, and feel like I missed my long ride and that's going to really affect my race day. Be instead of it letting you affect your race day, look at it as, well, you know what? I learned a valuable lesson, and I have to be prepared for more than one scenario, and that scenario can't be just mine. I have to be prepared for every scenario. Period. Look at Christian Blumenfeld, one of the best athletes on the planet, goes into, as at the lead in Oceanside, gets a flat tire, probably assumes that neutral bike support is going to be there, which honestly they should be at the front of the race, and has to wait 15 minutes because he chose not to have anything on his bike to repair. Even if it wasn't a permanent, fix for his front tire, it could have been at least a fix that would have gotten him moving again to where he wouldn't have bled 15 minutes, because the guy ended up running a 1:07 half marathon, fastest of the day. I mean, insane. And so you because he probably thought, hey, I'm not gonna get a flat, and it's too much bother to carry a flat kit. Or you look at, another, one of the Norwegian guys, Casper Storne, is like, he didn't look at the end of like coming into T2, and he stopped like 150 meters and unclipped before he's even supposed to. Stopped dead in his tracks. And they're like, you got more to go, dude. This is a professional. So age groupers, like we have to think through all this kind of stuff. And again, it's not just about what we want to control. It's like, again, control the controllables. And that's effort, execution, and attitude. You can't control whether someone kicks you in the goggles. You can't control whether, a volunteer who's probably never volunteered a day in their life doesn't hand you a bottle, and then all you want to do is rip them on Facebook. The volunteers today were terrible. These, don't know what we're doing. First of all, they're volunteers. They're taking time out of their day to do something for free for you, and stand on the side of the road for 8.5 hours and hand bottles to age group triathletes who can barely hold a straight line coming out of winter. So adjust, prepare, and think, all right, well, if I miss, and again, don't just prepare on how I'm going to get the bottle, prepare and think through what's going to happen if I don't, period. And that, I remember the Ohio 70.3, the last year you and I went up and did it in Delaware, and you did the relay. It was so warm. The dew point was so high. I was cruising through the first mile. And I remember the night before, I was like, it's going to be brutal. You got to stay cool. It's not going to be like how fast you go. It's going to be how little you slow down, because you get just so hot. You can't come back from it. I was like, you got to walk every aid station. You got to take water. And so I went through the first, and I grabbed something. I got to them. There was more ice, more water. And I went to go grab it. I totally dropped it. I had taken like 5 or 6 steps past it. And I turned and walked back to get it. And got the water and got the ice to cool myself down, because I was like, what is this, 8 seconds? Maybe to get ice and water to cool myself down. That could be the difference in dropping, 5 seconds per mile or dropping 30 seconds per mile. Little things like that. You have to, again, you can't just, and I think it's more fun to prepare for everything going right. Like no one hops into TriCalc or does their math like, hey, I wonder what my worst day might be like. They're like, no, they're like, best day ever, it's going to look like this. And then they're just disappointment follows, and inability to be flexible follows. And so when you're thinking through, how to prepare, especially for like the longer days, like you got Ironman Texas coming up. If it's windy, what am I going to do? If it's a tailwind out and tailwind back, how is my power plan going to change? If it's or it flip flops and it's headwind this way, tailwind, how's it going to change? If it's a crosswind, how's that going to affect my race? How am I going to choose to deviate my power and effort? If it's wetsuit legal, how am I going to execute? If it's not wetsuit legal, how am I going to execute? If the water temp is cold but the air temp is hot, what am I going to do? What am I going to choose? Am I going to choose to wear my wetsuit because the wetsuit legal? Or do I think that wearing my wetsuit is going to get my core temp 2 up, and just because the water's cool and the ambient temperature is warm doesn't mean that's the best right choice for that day? Let's say I come off the bike feeling really good. What should I do? My nutrition's nailed. I should do X. Let's say I come off the bike and my legs are a bit wobbly and I didn't nail my nutrition. I'm going to stop a few times to pee. Then what do I do? I'd say we plan so much for like A, B, and C, like Eagle, Beagle, Seagull. Here's what I'm going to nail. Here's how it's going to be. And we don't ever plan for like, maybe I deviate for a moment from plan A, but I shouldn't immediately like now be destined for plan B. Maybe I can get myself back on course for plan A, but I've got to have these. So it's like, if you're making out your race plan, you write out, plan A and then like 3 bullet points below it. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. If this happens, do this. You got to troubleshoot before you're there. If someone kicks me in the goggles on race day and I get a leak, what am I going to do? Am I going to do breaststroke? Am I going to stop dead in my tracks? Am I going to do backstroke? Am I going to swim and wait till I get around a buoy and like create distance? Like, how am I going to navigate that? what do I do? Right? Period. If I panic, if you're a person who panics in the water, what do I do? How do I prepare for that? Am I going to do backstroke? Am I going to tread water? Am I going to raise my hand? Am I going to grab a kayak? What am I going to do? Like, and then have a plan for that. If I get a flat tire, know how to change it. If I lose a bottle, am I going to go back and get it? Yes, but only if it's on like a flat straightaway. If it's going downhill, it's not safe. If I'm going uphill, probably not either, because then I have to start from scratch. But if it's on flat, I get it. If not, I need to drop my power down a little bit more to make sure I'm not overdoing it, so I can play a little bit of catch up by the time I get to the next aid station. Or make sure you have a bottle of water in the back. Make sure you have a Ziploc bag and, like, one of your bentos. I can make my own drink, and now problem solved. What should I go to the first mile or two? Should I go with flat Coke? Should I go with Gatorade? Should I go with water? Do you take any kind of other, like, electrolyte supplement? If I have a goo that doesn't taste well, it's always tasted well, what's my backup gel? Have those stuff in, like, special needs. It's like I just think we plan so much for the perfect race that honestly, like, isn't even about you. You didn't decide it. Period. It just happened. Your body just woke up and we're like, yes, you can ruin a perfect race by being just, like, totally irresponsible in your pacing. But for most of the time, like, as long as you're even within, like, the ballpark and margin of error, and you just wake up and you're having that day, you're gonna have that day. But that pretty much happens once. That's it. In, like, your entire career of doing triathlon. The rest of it is just so much about decision making and making, quality controlled decisions, these micro decisions every 10, 15, 20 minutes over the course of your day. Mm-hmm. And that's what gets you to the best possible result. Again, and again, it's very little of it is performance and physiology. It's just, you got it or you don't got it.
Yeah. I have usually every season I'll have a handful of days that I try to lock in, and some of them are really shitty days and other ones are great days. If I have a really bad day in the water, for example, I just don't feel like I have it. And we all have athletes that I just couldn't get it going today, but they end up doing, 2,500, 3,000. I always say it's like, lock that one in your brain, because if that's what happens in the race, you've got it in your back pocket. Or mm-hmm. Same with, like, the ride. It's like, my nutrition was off. I didn't have enough, blah, 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 but I still got through it. Those are good, same with the run. There's a lot of times when you're out there and you just, you don't feel like doing it, but somehow you get through it. And I always tell athletes, I'm saying, that's just remember that in case it happens, lock that memory in your brain to know you have it in you. And the same goes for good workouts. If I have an athlete leading up to Ironman and they have a great ride, like 5-6 hours or whatever, earlier in the season, maybe a couple months out or a month out or something like that, I'll be like, be that, that's who you can be. Right. So it's like, that's a confidence builder. And then the terrible days that you get through, those are confidence builders too. It's just a matter of, it's just recall, right? You can always go back into your filing cabinet of your brain and say, like, I've been here before. Now I know how I can get through it, and I guess what I'm saying is that don't underappreciate really shitty workouts, because they can really give you a lot. And especially when you need it and you're kind of out on an island in a race and you're like, oh, at least you've been there, you can kind of understand how to get through it.
There's just a lot of power in it. And you can't, you got to pick and choose them, right? Like, you can't do them all the time, because then, you're probably going to dig yourself a hole. But then sometimes you just got to decide, like, maybe today's the day to do it. And then tomorrow I'm committed to, resting and recovering for the next 2 days. What's the mental, emotional, physical cost? I know it's going to be higher, but it's going to give me a feather in my cap. And a lot of times we just take the feather in our cap and remember, like, the best workouts on the best days that went the best. And that's it. Instead of, like, man, I remember that day where I was just like, it was not going well. And then somehow I rallied and somehow I got it done. And you know what? It really wasn't that bad. Like, that's the one you have to think about. And, I think it's, people like to go back and look at their PR workouts and everything again. But, like, a lot of times I just like to go back and I did this for a few athletes when I mean, back when I was working with you, started working with you like over a decade ago, is I would like tally up all their swim, bike, and run hours in minutes and send it to them. I'm like, in all those hour and minutes, there were very few perfect workouts and very few terrible ones, but there was a lot of really good, solid workouts. So all you got to do is work out for X amount of minutes tomorrow, and there's a high likelihood you're going to go through all 3 stages. You're going to feel great, you're going to feel pretty good, and you're going to feel terrible. But you've always got it done, so you just got to get it done. And, going into these races, again, like Texas and the races where, again, any early season race when we're already kind of going through, a change in temperature and seasons, you get in that also leads to like a lack of preparation because most people are having to travel outside of their usual, typical seasonal climate, is be prepared for it and know, like Hess, that there's added stress in all of that, but there's ways to combat it and ways to adjust and make, do yourself, try to do a lot better than normal. And just again, it's all about stress management.
Fair enough.
Wrap it up, lock it in. Hopefully this podcast was not stressful. But as if you've raced ever before, you can relate to hopefully a lot of things that we talked about today. So think through it, feel things out, make some decisions in your training, in your race prep, to set yourself up for success. And as always, we love you guys. We appreciate you. Go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's our one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for coaching or camps the rest of the year, make sure you click on the tab and peruse some of the coaches. And if you can't find one that you feel like is right for you, then we'll do our best to pair with the perfect one for you based on the questionnaire. If you need anything from Mike, he's available, Mike at c26triathlon.com. If you need anything from me, Robbie at c26triathlon.com.
All right, man. Get out there.
All right, dude. Talk to you later.
All right. See you.